What if I told you that to really understand life, you need to kind of get cozy with death? Not in like a spooky kind of way,
Right.
but in a way that could actually make your life more joyful and fulfilling.
Yeah.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into the teachings of Osho,
Good.
a spiritual teacher who was known for turning conventional wisdom on its head.
Right.
His book, The Art of Living and Dying, is our guide for this deep dive.
Osho, he wasn't afraid to shake things up.
Right.
He challenged people to look at death not as like the enemy,
Yeah.
but as a fundamental part of life,
Mm-hmm.
even a path to liberation.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
But how does getting comfortable with death lead to a better life? That's what we're exploring today, right?
Exactly. And Osho starts by pointing out that death is so intense because it happens all at once
Mm-hmm.
in a single overwhelming moment.
Yeah,
Life, on the other hand, is spread out over time,
right.
so we don't experience its full intensity in the same way.
That's an interesting distinction. I guess we often think of death as this, like, gradual decline,
Yeah.
but Osho's saying it's more like a sudden flash of lightning.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that suddenness can be terrifying, of course.
Mhm.
But Osho argues that if we can face death without shrinking back, that same intensity can also be a catalyst for profound transformation.
So it's like the intensity of death can either break us or make us.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And to illustrate this point,
Okay.
Osho tells the story of Siddhartha,
Hmm.
who later became known as Buddha.
Yeah.
Siddhartha's father was so terrified of his son's eventual death
Right.
that he shielded him from any experience of it for 29 years.
No.
Built him a palace,
Oh, wow.
surrounded him with pleasure,
Yeah.
hid away anything related to suffering or old age.
Wow. Talk about an overprotective parent.
Right.
But I bet that backfired spectacularly, didn't it?
Oh, it did. Because eventually, Siddhartha ventured outside the palace walls
Right.
and came face to face with sickness, old age, and death.
Yeah.
And the shock of this encounter shattered his sheltered worldview
Mm-hmm.
and sent him on a quest to understand the true nature of life and death.
So the lesson here is that we can't hide from death forever. No matter how hard we try to avoid it, it will eventually catch up to us.
Exactly. And Osho takes this idea a step further.
Okay.
He argues that even our deeply held beliefs
Mm-hmm.
are often just cover-ups for our fear of death and the uncertainty that surrounds it.
You mean like clinging to religion or spirituality as a way to avoid facing the reality of our own mortality?
Precisely. We may tell ourselves we believe,
Right.
but deep down there's often doubt and disbelief lurking beneath the surface. Osho even makes this provocative statement.
Hook.
He says most people die at 21.
Wait, die at 21? Hold on a second.
Yeah,
That doesn't sound right. What's he really getting at there?
it's a powerful metaphor.
Okay.
You see, what Osho is referring to is the death of our authentic selves,
Oh, okay.
that wild, unfiltered essence we have as children. He's saying that around the age of 21, most of us have been fully conditioned by society,
Right.
molded by cultural norms, expectations, and the need to fit in.
Oh, I'm starting to get it. It's like we trade our true selves for a socially acceptable version, a kind of metaphorical death of our individuality.
You've got it.
Yeah.
And Osho is challenging us to recognize those moments in our lives when we've compromised our authenticity,
Yeah.
those times when we've essentially died a little inside.
Right.
He even uses this striking image to describe it,
Okay.
clinging to a paper boat in a vast ocean.
Okay. A paper boat versus a vast ocean.
Yeah.
Now that's an image that grabs you. What's he trying to say with that analogy?
Well, think about it.
Okay.
The paper boat represents our beliefs and rituals,
Yeah.
the things we cling to for comfort and security.
Mm-hmm.
But in the face of the vastness of life and death, those beliefs can feel awfully flimsy,
Right.
like they might not be enough to keep us afloat.
So is he saying we should just abandon our beliefs altogether?
Not necessarily. He's not saying we have to throw the boat away.
Yeah.
But he is encouraging us to learn to swim.
Okay.
He's saying that by relying too heavily on external beliefs and rituals,
Yeah.
we might be missing out on developing the inner strength and resilience we need to truly navigate the ocean of existence.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like
Yeah.
if you're always clinging to the boat, you'll never learn to trust yourself to stay afloat on your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Osho believes that one of the best ways to develop that inner strength
Okay.
is to actually embrace the awareness of our own mortality.
Really?
Yeah.
Facing our fear of death head on is the key to living more fully. I'm not sure I see the connection yet.
Well, think about it this way.
Yeah.
When you are constantly aware of the preciousness of time, When
Mm.
you know that every moment is a gift,
Yeah.
you're less likely to waste it on things that don't truly matter.
Right.
You become more selective
Yeah.
about how you spend your energy,
Mm-hmm.
more intentional about how you live your life.
It's interesting. It's like by acknowledging our mortality, we actually give ourselves permission to live more fully in the present moment, right?
Exactly. And this leads us to another one of Osho's radical ideas.
Okay.
He says that instead of seeing death as an ending,
Yeah.
we should view it as a culmination, a peak experience, even,
Okay. I'm on the edge of my seat here. What could possibly be a peak experience about death?
well, Osho actually compares it to the ultimate orgasm.
Wait, what? Death and orgasm. I'm not sure I follow.
He's not talking about the physical act, of course.
Right.
What he's highlighting is the complete release,
Okay.
the letting go of all attachments and limitations.
Hmm.
Think about it.
Okay.
In that moment of death, everything falls away.
Yeah.
Your body, your identity, your worries, your possessions.
Right.
It's a total surrender,
Mm.
a merging back into the source of all things.
Wow. That's a very different way of looking at death.
It is. And for Osho, that release, that merging back into the source is the ultimate liberation.
So it's not just about accepting death, it's about seeing it as a doorway to something bigger, something beyond our limited human understanding.
You got it. And this brings us to another important aspect of Osho's teachings.
Okay.
The idea that what we think and feel in the moments leading up to death can actually shape our next life.
Okay, that's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Right.
So according to Osho, the way we die influences our next life. That's a lot to process.
It is, and it really emphasizes the importance of cultivating awareness and letting go of negative attachments throughout our lives, not just at the very end.
So it's not just about that final moment, but about the kind of energy we cultivate throughout our journey.
Exactly. Osho even goes so far as to say that the way we die reflects how we lived.
Wow.
He paints this vivid picture of a miser clinging to life with clenched fists,
Right.
while a loving person dies with open hands peacefully surrendering.
That image really sticks with you, doesn't it? Makes you think about what you want that final moment to look like and what kind of life you need to lead to get there.
It does. And it underscores the importance of aligning our actions with our values throughout our lives so we can face death with integrity and peace.
It's a powerful reminder to live authentically. But what about old age? That's a stage of life many people dread, often associating it with decline and loss. Does Osho offer any insights on how to approach aging differently?
He does. In fact, he flips the script on how we typically view getting older.
Okay.
Instead of fearing it, he encourages us to embrace old age as a time of fruition and wisdom.
Okay.
He contrasts the beauty of a mature organism that has lived fully amiva with the ugliness of one that is diseased and weakened by a life spent in fear and denial.
So it's not age itself that's the problem, but how we approach it. If we've spent our lives clinging to those paper boats afraid to truly live, then getting older just becomes another source of anxiety.
Exactly. Osho was suggesting that if we live authentically, embracing both the joys and sorrows,
Yeah.
then old age becomes a natural culmination of a life well lived.
Right.
We can reap the rewards of our experiences, sharing our wisdom and perspective with others.
That's a much more inspiring way to think about aging. But it sounds like a lot of inner work is required to get to that point. How do we break free from societal expectations and those deep-seated anxieties, especially about growing older?
Osho stresses the importance of tuning into our inner voice, that authentic self that often gets drowned out by all the external noise.
Mm.
He says we need to be willing to face our fears and anxieties head on,
Yeah.
to really examine them in order to move beyond them.
It's like what we discussed earlier, learning to swim instead of clinging to that paper boat of external validation and societal expectations.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
It starts with awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Osho encourages us to become more conscious of our thoughts and feelings, to observe them without judgment.
Okay.
This allows us to create some space between ourselves and those anxieties,
Right.
which can help us see them more objectively.
So it's not about trying to suppress those fears or pretend they don't exist, but rather about acknowledging them and developing a sense of detachment from them.
Precisely. It's a subtle shift in perspective, but it can be incredibly powerful.
This sounds a lot like mindfulness practices, which have become increasingly popular in recent years.
It is very much aligned with those practices. Osho was a huge advocate for meditation as a tool for self-discovery and liberation. He believed that through meditation, we can tap into a deeper level of awareness, what he calls the witness.
That term, the witness, has come up a few times now. Can you elaborate on what that means, especially for someone who might be new to Osho's teachings?
Of course. Imagine there's a part of you that's always observing, always watching your thoughts and emotions without getting caught up in them. That's the witness. It's the part of you that remains calm and detached even when your mind is racing or your emotions are intense.
So it's like having an inner observer, a quiet space within us that's not affected by the constant chatter of our minds.
Exactly. And by cultivating this sense of the witness, we can start to detach from the drama of our thoughts and emotions. We can see them more clearly, understand their origins, and ultimately choose how we want to respond to them.
That's a really powerful idea. But how do we actually cultivate that sense of the witness? Is it something we're born with, or is it a skill we can develop over time?
Osho believed it's something that's already within us, but it often gets buried under layers of conditioning and mental noise. Meditation is one of the most effective ways to tap into that inner stillness and connect with the witness.
So through regular meditation, we can train our minds to become more aware and less reactive.
Precisely. It's like strengthening a muscle. The more we practice observing our thoughts and emotions without judgment, the stronger our ability to detach from them becomes.
That makes sense. But how does this concept of the witness relate to everything else we've been talking about? Embracing death, living authentically, and finding peace in old age.
It's all interconnected, you see. The witness is what allows us to observe our fear of death without being overwhelmed by it. It's what gives us the courage to challenge societal expectations and live according to our own values. And it's what allows us to embrace old age as a natural stage of life, rather than fearing it as a decline.
Wow, it sounds like cultivating the witness is really the key to unlocking Osho's entire philosophy.
You could say that. It's the foundation for everything else.
So we're not just passive observers in our own lives, but active participants who can choose how we want to experience the world, even in the face of challenges like death and aging.
Exactly. And this leads us to another fascinating aspect of Osho's teachings.
Yeah.
The idea that death itself is not an ending, but a transition.
A transition. So Osho doesn't see death as the absolute end, but more like a doorway to something else.
That's right. He viewed death not as like an annihilation of the self,
Right.
but as a transformation,
Okay.
a merging back into the source of all that.
Yeah.
He often used the analogy of a snake shedding its skin to
Yeah.
illustrate this point.
That's a powerful image. I'm picturing a snake slithering out of its old skin, leaving it behind as it moves into a new phase of its existence. How does that relate to death?
Well, think of the old skin as representing everything that's no longer serving us.
Okay,
Our
yeah.
limited beliefs,
Yeah.
our fears, our attachments to the material world.
Right.
Death, in Osho's view,
Yes.
is the ultimate shedding of that old skin.
Okay.
It's a liberation from the constraints of our physical form and a return to a state of pure awareness.
So we're not just our physical bodies or our thoughts and emotions. There's something more fundamental.
Right.
Something that transcends the limitations of our earthly existence.
Exactly. Osho believed that our true nature is pure consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and that death is simply a transition from one state of being to another.
Right.
It's not an ending,
Okay.
but a continuation of the journey.
That's a very different way of looking at death than what we're usually taught.
Right.
It's less about fear and finality
Yeah.
and more about transformation and liberation.
Mm-hmm.
But even with all these insights,
Yeah.
I have to admit I still feel some apprehension about death.
Right.
It's hard to completely let go of that fear of the unknown.
That's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
Death is a mystery,
Yeah.
and it's natural to have some anxiety about what lies beyond.
Right.
But Osho reminds us that we don't have to face it alone.
Mm-hmm.
We have the support of the universe,
Right.
the love of those around us,
Yeah.
and the strength of our own inner being, that witness we've been talking about.
That's a comforting thought. So
Definitely.
it's not about denying the fear, but about remembering that we have the resources to navigate those feelings.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Osho also believed that the quality of our transition through death is largely determined by the way we live our lives.
Okay.
If we cultivate awareness, love, and acceptance throughout our journey,
Yeah.
then death becomes simply another stage of transformation, a homecoming, rather than an ending.
That makes sense. If we spend our lives resisting life, clinging to those paper boats,
Right.
then death might feel like a violent riptide.
Yeah.
But if we learn to swim, to trust the current, then maybe we can approach that final transition with more grace and peace.
Beautifully put. Osho's teachings emphasize that it's not just about how we die, but about how we live. It's about making choices that are aligned with our values,
Mm-hmm.
expressing our creativity,
Yeah.
and connecting with others in meaningful ways.
Right.
It's about savoring each moment
Mm.
as the precious gift that it is.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've explored so many fascinating ideas.
Yeah.
The nature of death, the importance of authenticity, the transformative power of love, the concept of the witness,
Yeah.
and the idea that death is not an ending but a transition.
It's been a pleasure.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on what it means to live and die well.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And remember, this is just the beginning.
Yeah,
Osho's teachings are rich with wisdom and insight, and there's always more to discover.
definitely. I'm going to be reflecting on these ideas for a long time to come. But before we wrap up, what's one final provocative thought our listeners can take away from this deep dive?
Here's a question to ponder. If you knew you had only a limited time left,
Okay.
how would you choose to live differently?
Mm-hmm.
Would you make different choices? Would you prioritize different things? This question can help you clarify what truly matters and inspire you to live with more intention and purpose.
That's a powerful question to leave our listeners with. It's a reminder that we all have a limited time on this earth,
Yeah,
and it's up to us to make the most of it.
exactly. So live each day to the fullest, express your love freely,
Mm-hmm.
and embrace the beauty and mystery of existence.
Wise words. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of living and dying. Until next time, keep exploring.
Did you get any of that?